I should have known something was wrong when Nora started wearing perfume to her study sessions. My wife of 15 years, stumbling through our kitchen at midnight, reeking of expensive cologne that sure as hell wasn't mine. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. "How was the group study, honey?" I asked from my spot at the kitchen table, laptop open, pretending to work on logistics reports. The sarcasm in my voice could have cut glass, but Nora was too drunk or too guilty to notice. "Oh, she slurred, fumbling with her designer purse. Another recent purchase I didn't remember approving. Dental hygiene certification stuff. So boring you'd fall asleep. Right. If she was studying dental hygiene, I was the Queen of England. I'm Ethan Carrow, 45 years old, and I coordinate supply chains for a mid-sized logistics company here in Millfield, Massachusetts. It's not glamorous work, but it pays well and requires attention to detail, a skill that was about to serve me in ways I never imagined. Nora kicked off her heels, the same black stilettos she claimed were too uncomfortable for anything but special occasions. Apparently studying dental procedures qualified as special now. "I'm going to shower," she mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "At midnight? That's dedication to hygiene." She paused at the kitchen doorway, her 42-year-old frame silhouetted against the hallway light. For a moment, I thought she might confess, might save us both the inevitable drama. Instead, she just shrugged. Can't be too clean in my profession. After she disappeared upstairs, I sat there staring at her purse on the counter. The zipper was partially open, and I could see the corner of her phone peeking out. Nora was usually obsessive about her privacy, never leaving her phone unattended. The fact that she'd forgotten it downstairs told me everything about her mental state. I shouldn't have looked. In a perfect world, I would have trusted my wife, gone to bed, and chalked up my suspicions to middle-aged paranoia. But this wasn't a perfect world, and I wasn't a perfect husband. The phone was unlocked. Her text messages were a goldmine of infidelity. The most recent conversation was with someone labeled Brett Jim with a flexing bicep emoji. Classy. Brett. Can't wait for tomorrow's cardio session. Nora. Same here. Ethan's working late again, so we'll have plenty of time. Brett, your husband sounds like a real workaholic. Nora, you have no idea. Sometimes I feel like I'm married to a spreadsheet I scrolled up, my stomach churning with each message. They'd been at this for 3 months. 3 months of study sessions and girls' nights and helping friends move. The lies were so elaborate I almost admired the creativity. The shower started running upstairs. I quickly screenshotted the most damning conversations and sent them to my own phone, then deleted the evidence from her sent messages. If Nora wanted to play games, she'd learned that logistics coordinators were very good at managing information flow. I closed her phone and placed it back in her purse, exactly as I'd found it. Then I sat back in my chair and laughed. Actually laughed out loud in my empty kitchen. Not because anything was funny, but because the alternative was screaming. The next morning, Nora acted like nothing had happened. She made coffee, kissed my cheek, and asked about my day as if she hadn't spent the previous evening planning her next rendezvous with Brett GM. "I've got another study group tonight," she said, buttering her toast with practiced nonchalance. "Might run late again?" "Of course you do." I sipped my coffee and watched her over the rim of my mug. "Same group as last night?" "Yeah, same people. You know how it is with certification programs. Really intensive." "I bet it is. All that hands-on practice." She looked at me sharply, but I kept my expression neutral. Let her wonder. At work, I tried to focus on shipping manifests and delivery schedules, but my mind kept drifting to Brett Jim. Who was this guy? What did he have that I didn't? I'd seen Nora's browser history. She'd been looking up personal trainers at a gym downtown, CrossFit places with names like Iron Temple and Beast Mode Fitness. Around lunch, my phone buzzed with a text from Jenna, Nora's best friend and partner in gossip. Jenna had never liked me, thought Nora had settled when she married a logistics guy instead of holding out for someone more exciting. "Jenna, check out this cute pic from yesterday." The attached photo showed 4 women at a trendy cafe downtown, but in the background, clear as day, were Nora and a muscular guy with a man bun. His hand was on her lower back, and she was laughing at something he'd said. The timestamp showed 2:30 p.m., right when Nora had texted me about being swamped at work. I stared at the photo for a long time. Brett was everything I wasn't. Young, fit, probably had abs you could grate cheese on. The kind of guy who wore tank tops unironically and called everyone bro. But he was also stupid enough to be photographed in public with a married woman, which told me everything I needed to know about his strategic thinking abilities. That evening, I told Nora I had to work late on a rush shipment to California. She tried to hide her excitement, but failed miserably. "Oh, that's too bad," she said, already reaching for her phone. "I guess I'll just go to my study group then." "You do that. Study hard." Instead of going to the office, I drove to Brett's neighborhood. Finding his address had been embarrassingly easy. A simple Google search of Brett personal trainer Millfield had led me to his Instagram, his business website, and eventually his apartment complex. I parked across the street and waited. At 7:30, Nora's Honda pulled into the parking lot. She'd changed clothes since leaving the house, trading her conservative work outfit for a tight dress and those special occasion heels. She practically skipped to the building entrance. I sat there for 2 hours, watching the windows of Brett's second-floor apartment, seeing shadows move behind the curtains. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of silhouettes that made my stomach turn. But instead of rage, I felt something unexpected: relief. The uncertainty was over. The gaslighting, the second-guessing myself, the wondering if I was being paranoid. All of it could stop now. I had facts, and facts were something I could work with. At 10 o'clock, I drove to a 24-hour print shop and made copies of the screenshots from Nora's phone. Then I went to an office supply store and bought a pack of bright yellow sticky notes. Back at Brett's apartment complex, I found his mailbox and stuck a note to it. "Hope you lifted with your legs, not your back tonight. Safety first. E." Then I went home and put an identical note on Nora's pillow. She found it when she came home at midnight, reeking of that same cologne and looking thoroughly satisfied with her study session. The scream that came from our bedroom was worth every minute I'd spent sitting in that parking lot. Nora came downstairs like a hurricane in a bathrobe, clutching the yellow sticky note and looking like she'd seen a ghost. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, waving the note in my face. I was sitting in my recliner, reading a Tom Clancy novel and sipping a beer. I looked up at her with the kind of mild curiosity you'd show a moderately interesting TV commercial. "It's a safety reminder," I said calmly. "Back injuries are serious business. I thought your friend Brett should know." Her face went through several color changes, pale white to angry red to sick green. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." I bookmarked my page and set the novel aside. "Tell me, honey, what exactly are you studying in these certification courses? Human anatomy?" "Ethan, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. You've gotten very creative with explanations lately." I stood up and walked to the kitchen, Nora trailing behind me like a guilty dog. 3 months of explanations, if my math is correct. She tried the offense is the best defense approach. "Have you been spying on me, going through my things?" "Spying?" I laughed and opened the refrigerator, taking my time selecting another beer. "Nora, you left your phone on the counter with a text conversation open. I didn't have to spy on anything. You practically handed me a written confession." The fight that followed was spectacular. 15 years of marriage, and I'd never seen Nora lose control like that. She screamed, she cried, she threw a coffee mug at the wall. She called me boring, predictable, emotionally unavailable. She said I worked too much, paid too little attention to her, had let myself go physically. And through it all, I stood there recording her on my phone. "What are you doing?" she shrieked when she noticed. "Documenting," I said simply, "for the divorce proceedings." That stopped her cold. "Divorce? Ethan, we can work this out. It doesn't have to—" "Oh, it absolutely has to." I stopped recording and slipped the phone back into my pocket. See, the thing about logistics is that once you identify a problem in the supply chain, you have to fix it, and you, Nora, are definitely a problem. She tried tears next. Big, dramatic sobs about how sorry she was, how it didn't mean anything, how Brett was just a mistake. She begged me not to throw away 15 years of marriage over one stupid error in judgment. One error? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots I'd taken. 93 text messages over 3 months. That's not an error. That's a pattern. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the best divorce attorney in town. Margaret Chen had a reputation for being ruthless, expensive, and very good at protecting her clients' assets. "Your wife doesn't work full-time?" she asked, reviewing the financial documents I'd brought. "Part-time dental hygienist, maybe 20 hours a week. And she's been having an affair for 3 months? Documented and verified." Margaret smiled the kind of smile that probably made opposing lawyers wet themselves. "Mr. Carrow, I think we can work something out that will be very favorable to you." Massachusetts was a no-fault divorce state, but adultery could still affect the division of assets, especially when one spouse had been using marital funds to finance their affair. Those expensive dinners, the new clothes, the hotel rooms, all of it paid for with our joint credit cards. We'll file for divorce citing irreconcilable differences, Margaret explained, but we'll also document the adultery for asset division purposes. Your wife will be responsible for any debts she incurred during the affair, and given her limited income, that's going to be a significant burden. While Margaret worked on the legal paperwork, I focused on Brett. His gym was called Iron Temple, and it was exactly what I'd expected. All exposed brick and industrial lighting, with motivational posters featuring people who looked like they had been carved from marble. The kind of place where they sold protein shakes for $12, and everyone grunted loudly while lifting weights. I signed up for a day pass and spent an hour observing Brett in his natural habitat. He was 28, according to his bio on the gym's website, with a kind of artificial confidence that came from years of being told he was special. He flirted with every woman in the place, married or not, and called everyone bro or boss, depending on their gender. The locker room was my opportunity. I waited until Brett was in the middle of a training session, then slipped into the men's changing area. His locker was easy to identify. It had a custom nameplate that read, Brett the Beast, in Comic Sans font. Because of course it did. The STD warning sticker I'd printed looked official enough to fool anyone who didn't examine it closely. I placed it carefully on his locker door, right at eye level, then left through the back exit. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my car across the street when Brett discovered it. The scream of rage that echoed from the building was audible even through the gym's soundproofed walls. But my real masterpiece was the financial trap I'd set for Nora. See, the thing about being married to a logistics coordinator is that your husband understands systems, including financial systems. Over the years, I'd carefully structured our accounts so that I was the primary holder on everything important. The mortgage, the car loans, the good credit cards, all in my name, with Nora as an authorized user. When I removed her from those accounts, her credit score was going to crater. And when the divorce settlement made her responsible for the affair-related debts, she was going to discover that her part-time dental hygienist income couldn't support the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. The first sign that my plan was working came 3 days later, when Mrs. Delaney from next door called me at work. "Ethan, dear," she said in her gossipy New England accent, "I thought you should know. I saw Nora at the grocery store this morning, and her card was declined. Quite the scene, actually. She was with that Jenna woman, and they were both carrying on something fierce." Mrs. Delaney was 73 years old and had lived in our neighborhood longer than anyone. She knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing it. "Declined?" I asked, feigning surprise. "Oh, yes. The poor checkout girl had to call the manager over and everything. Nora was red as a beet, claiming there must be some mistake with the bank. Jenna was taking pictures with her phone. You know how these women are with their social media." That evening, Nora confronted me about the credit cards. "My cards aren't working," she said, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. "That's strange," I replied, not looking up from my laptop. "Maybe you should call the bank." I did call the bank. They said I'd been removed from the accounts. "Huh? That is weird." She stood there for a long moment, waiting for me to explain or apologize or fix it. When I didn't, she tried a different approach. "Ethan, I know you're angry, but cutting off my access to money isn't going to solve anything." "I didn't cut off your access to money," I said, finally looking at her. "You have your own checking account from your job. You have access to all the money you've earned." The realization hit her like a physical blow. In 15 years of marriage, she'd never had to support herself financially. Her part-time job was pin money, something to get her out of the house and provide a little independence. The idea that she might have to live on that income alone had never occurred to her. "This is financial abuse," she said weakly. "No, this is consequences." I closed my laptop and stood up. "You want to act like you're single? Congratulations. You get to live like you're single too." That night, I booked a flight to Lisbon. I'd been offered a position with the Portuguese branch of an international logistics company 6 months earlier. At the time, I'd turned it down because Nora didn't want to leave Massachusetts. But the offer was still open, and the idea of starting fresh in Europe was looking more appealing by the day. The flight was scheduled for the following week, right after I'd be served with divorce papers. I didn't tell Nora about the job or the flight. Let her figure it out when I was 3,500 miles away. Portugal was everything I'd hoped it would be. Warm, beautiful, and completely free of my soon-to-be ex-wife's drama. I found a small apartment in Lisbon's Bairro Alto neighborhood, with tile floors and a balcony that overlooked the narrow cobblestone streets. My new job was challenging but rewarding, coordinating shipments between European ports and American distributors. The work was similar to what I'd done in Massachusetts, but the international scope made it more interesting. More importantly, I was 8 time zones away from Nora's increasingly desperate attempts to contact me. My phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts that I ignored. She'd tried everything from tearful apologies to angry threats to promises of couples counseling. When I didn't respond, she started having friends and family members reach out on her behalf. I blocked them all. The only person from home I stayed in contact with was Mrs. Delaney, who called me every few days with updates on the neighborhood gossip. She'd taken it upon herself to be my eyes and ears in Millfield, and she was better than any private investigator I could have hired. "Your Nora's been making quite the spectacle of herself," Mrs. Delaney reported during one of our weekly calls. "She and that muscle-bound boyfriend of hers have been parading around town like they're some kind of celebrity couple." I was sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset over the Tagus River and sipping a glass of excellent Portuguese wine that cost less than a Starbucks coffee back home. "How so?" I asked. "Oh, you know how these social media types are. Pictures of themselves at every restaurant, every event, every coffee shop. That Jenna woman is helping her document everything, like she's trying to prove how happy she is." I pulled up Nora's Instagram account, which I'd been monitoring from a fake profile I'd created. Mrs. Delaney was right. The feed was full of photos of Nora and Brett looking blissfully happy. Candlelit dinners, couples workouts, romantic walks on the beach. The captions were particularly nauseating. "Finally found my soulmate," and "living my best life with my amazing man," and "when you know, you know." But I could see what others might miss. The strain around Nora's eyes, the forced nature of her smiles, the way she was trying just a little too hard to convince everyone, including herself, that she was happy. The financial pressure was clearly getting to her. She'd moved out of our house and into a small apartment downtown, and based on the background details in her photos, it wasn't in the best neighborhood. "And that Jim fellow," Mrs. Delaney continued, "he's been having troubles of his own." "What kind of troubles?" "Well, you didn't hear this from me, but my grandson Tommy goes to that Iron Temple place, and he says half the members have been canceling their memberships. Something about rumors regarding the owner's personal hygiene habits, if you catch my meaning." I smiled, remembering the STD sticker I'd placed on Brett's locker. Amazing how quickly gossip spread in a small town. "That's unfortunate," I said, not bothering to hide my satisfaction. Tommy also mentioned that someone's been leaving negative reviews online. Very detailed reviews about unprofessional behavior and questionable business practices. I hadn't left any reviews myself, but I wasn't surprised that others had picked up the thread. Once you plant a seed of doubt about someone's character, it tends to grow on its own. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Delaney called with even better news. "Ethan, dear, you'll never guess what happened at the grocery store yesterday." "Nora's card was declined again?" "Oh, much better than that. She was there with that Brett fellow, and they got into the most awful argument right there in the produce section. Something about money and responsibilities and who was going to pay for what. The poor boy at the deli counter looked like he wanted to crawl under the cheese display. I could picture it perfectly, Nora realizing that Brett expected her to contribute financially to their relationship, and Brett discovering that his new girlfriend was essentially broke. "Did they work it out?" I asked. "Well, Brett stormed off without buying anything, and Nora was left standing there with a cart full of groceries she couldn't afford. Had to put half of it back. Jenna wasn't there to document that part, I noticed. That evening, I posted a photo on my own social media accounts. A picture of myself at a beachside cafe in Cascais, raising a glass of wine to the camera. The caption read, "Living my best life in Portugal. Sometimes the best revenge is a life well lived. Zursak, blessed, daksho expat life, seacha new beginnings." I made sure the post was public, knowing that Nora and her friends would see it within hours. The response was immediate. My phone exploded with notifications, likes, comments, friend requests from people I barely knew. Apparently, my transformation from cuckolded husband to successful international businessman was inspiring to a lot of people. More importantly, I knew Nora would see it and realize that while she was struggling to make ends meet in Massachusetts, I was thriving in Europe. The psychological warfare was working perfectly. A few days later, Nora made a desperate play for attention. She and Brett announced their engagement on social media. The photos showed a modest ring and forced smiles, but the captions were over-the-top enthusiastic. "He proposed. I can't believe I get to spend the rest of my life with this amazing man. Planning a summer wedding. Engaged, Ethan soulmate, happily ever after." Mrs. Delaney called me within hours of the announcement. "Did you see the news?" she asked, barely containing her excitement. "I saw it." "Well, I have it on good authority that the ring came from one of those rent-to-own jewelry places downtown. My neighbor's daughter works there, and she says they're on a payment plan." Of course they were. Brett's gym was failing, and Nora was living paycheck to paycheck, but they needed to keep up appearances, to prove to everyone, especially me, that they were happy and successful. I responded to their engagement announcement with a photo of my own. A shot of the Lisbon skyline at sunset, with a glass of expensive port wine in the foreground. The caption was simple. Cheers to new beginnings. Some people get engaged, others get enlightened. In sac perspective, Chen Portugal, grateful. The subtext was clear to anyone who knew the situation. While they were struggling to afford a fake ring, I was living my best life in one of Europe's most beautiful cities. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. The real revenge was still to come. 3 months later, Mrs. Delaney called with the news I'd been waiting for. "They've set a date," she announced without preamble. "June 15th at that fancy venue out on Cape Cod, the one with the big white tent overlooking the water." I was walking through Lisbon's Rocio Square, enjoying the warm evening air and the sound of street musicians playing fado music. The contrast between my peaceful new life and the drama unfolding back in Massachusetts was almost comical. "That's a nice venue," I said. "Expensive, too." "Oh, I'm sure it is. Though I heard through the grapevine that they're having it on a Thursday afternoon to save money, and the guest list is rather small, maybe 50 people." A Thursday afternoon wedding was the kind of compromise you made when you couldn't afford what you really wanted, but were too proud to admit it. I could picture Nora spinning it as intimate and romantic, while secretly fading of embarrassment. "Are you planning to attend?" Mrs. Delaney asked with barely concealed glee. "I wouldn't miss it," I said. Of course, I had no intention of actually showing up, but I didn't need to be there in person. I had something much better planned. The invitation arrived 2 weeks later, forwarded to my Lisbon address by my lawyer. It was a cheap print job on cardstock that was trying very hard to look expensive. The wording was overly formal, the kind of language people used when they wanted to sound more sophisticated than they actually were. "Mr. and Mrs. Robert Flint request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter Nora Elizabeth to Brett Michael Holland." The return address was Nora's parents' house, which told me that they were helping to pay for this disaster, probably mortgaging their retirement to fund their daughter's second chance at happiness. I responded with a polite decline, citing work obligations in Europe, but I included a small gift, a bottle of Portuguese wine with a note that read, "Wishing you all the happiness you deserve, Ethan." The wine was decent but not expensive, and the note was perfectly ambiguous. Nora would spend hours analyzing those 7 words, trying to figure out if I was being sincere or sarcastic. 2 weeks before the wedding, I put my real plan into motion. I'd been cultivating a friendship with Miles Pemberton, a British expat who ran a small marketing consultancy in Lisbon. Miles was in his 50s, divorced, and had a wonderfully cynical sense of humor. More importantly, he was very good at what he did. "You want me to do what exactly?" he asked when I explained my proposal. We were sitting at a cafe in the Chiado district, watching tourists struggle with Portuguese menus while we enjoyed perfectly prepared bifana sandwiches. "Create a social media monitoring system," I said. "Track specific hashtags and keywords related to the wedding, compile the posts in real time, and create a highlight reel of the best moments." "And by best moments, you mean the most embarrassing ones. The fights, the drama, the moments when people let their guard down and show their true feelings." Miles grinned. "You're a vindictive bastard, aren't you?" "I prefer thorough." He agreed to help, partly because he enjoyed the technical challenge and partly because he found the whole situation entertaining. Within a week, he'd set up a system that would capture every social media post related to Nora and Brett's wedding, analyze them for emotional content, and create an automated compilation of the most dramatic moments. The wedding day arrived with all the pomp and circumstance you'd expect from a couple trying to prove their happiness to the world. I watched the early posts from my balcony in Lisbon, sipping coffee and enjoying the show. The photos started innocently enough, getting ready shots, flower arrangements, guests arriving at the venue. Nora looked beautiful in her dress, though I could see the stress lines around her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. But as the day progressed, cracks began to show. Jenna, ever the loyal documentarian, posted a video of Nora having a minor meltdown about the flowers being the wrong shade of pink. Brett was captured on someone's Instagram story snapping at a waiter about the bar setup. The wedding party looked uncomfortable, like they were all pretending to be happier than they actually felt. And then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Paula Martinez was Nora's former coworker at the dental office, someone who'd been let go 6 months earlier due to budget cuts. She'd clearly been hitting the open bar pretty hard, and her social media posts were getting progressively more honest as the afternoon wore on. At first, it was just typical wedding guest content. Photos of her table, complaints about the chicken being dry, observations about other guests' fashion choices. But as the reception continued, Paula's posts took on a darker tone. Interesting choice of venue for someone who claimed she couldn't afford to split the lunch bill last month. she posted, along with a photo of the expensive waterfront setting. Love seeing people live their authentic truth, she added an hour later with a picture of Nora and Brett during their first dance. The quotes around authentic truth were doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, but the real fireworks started during the speeches. Brett's best man, a fellow gym enthusiast named Derek, gave a rambling toast about finding true love and never settling for less than you deserve. The speech was clearly aimed at me, full of not-so-subtle digs about men who don't appreciate what they have and let work become more important than relationships. I watched the video with genuine amusement. Derek had clearly been coached by Brett, and the whole performance was so transparently petty that it actually made me look better by comparison. But then Paula stood up. She wasn't supposed to give a speech. She wasn't in the wedding party, wasn't a close friend, wasn't anyone important enough to warrant microphone time, but she was drunk enough not to care about protocol. I just want to say something, she announced, swaying slightly as she grabbed the microphone from the confused DJ. The room went quiet. I could see the panic in Nora's eyes, even through the grainy phone video someone was streaming live. I've known Nora for 3 years, Paula continued, her words slightly slurred but perfectly audible. And I have to say, it's amazing how quickly people can change when they find their true love. She made air quotes with her free hand, nearly losing her balance in the process. I mean, 6 months ago, Nora was crying in the break room about how she couldn't afford to fix her car, but now she's having a destination wedding on Cape Cod. It's like a miracle. Someone, probably Jenna, was frantically trying to signal the DJ to cut the microphone, but Paula was on a roll. And Brett, such a catch. I heard from my cousin who goes to Iron Temple that he's such a dedicated trainer. He gives private lessons to all the ladies. Very hands-on approach, if you know what I mean. The room erupted. Brett jumped up from the head table, his face red with anger. Nora burst into tears. Guests started shouting over each other, some trying to defend the couple, others clearly enjoying the drama. In the chaos, someone knocked over a champagne glass, which shattered and cut another guest's hand. The venue staff rushed in to manage the situation, and the whole reception devolved into a Jerry Springer episode with better catering. Miles's monitoring system captured every moment of it, the shouting, the tears, the accusations, the dramatic exits. Within an hour, he'd compiled a highlight reel that was better than anything reality TV had ever produced. I watched the whole thing unfold from my peaceful balcony in Lisbon, raising a glass of excellent Portuguese wine to the chaos unfolding 3,000 miles away. The best part was that I hadn't had to do anything. I'd simply created the conditions for Nora and Brett's own poor choices to catch up with them, then sat back and watched as their carefully constructed facade crumbled under the weight of its own contradictions. As the sun set over the Tagus River, my phone buzzed with a desperate call from Nora. I let it go to voicemail, then deleted the message without listening to it. Some people got the wedding they deserved, others got the revenge they'd earned, and I was definitely in the second category. The wedding disaster was just the beginning. Within hours of Paula's drunken speech, the videos had spread across social media like wildfire. Someone had live-streamed the entire meltdown, and it quickly became the kind of viral content that people shared with captions like, "This is why I hate weddings," and "When keeping it real goes wrong." Miles called me the next morning, barely able to contain his laughter. "Mate, you need to see the analytics on this," he said. "The wedding hashtag has been viewed over 100,000 times. There are reaction videos, commentary threads, even a few marriage counselors using it as an example of what not to do." I was having breakfast at my favorite cafe in Príncipe Real, reading Portuguese newspapers and enjoying the anonymity of being just another expat in a foreign city. "Any word from the happy couple?" I asked. "Oh, it gets better. Brett's gym has been getting review bombed since yesterday. Apparently Paula's comments about his private lessons struck a nerve with some of his former clients. The business is basically finished." I felt a moment of something that might have been sympathy, but it passed quickly. Brett had made his choices, and choices had consequences. Mrs. Delaney called that afternoon with more details. "Ethan, dear, you missed quite the show," she said, her voice practically vibrating with excitement. "The whole neighborhood's been talking about nothing else." "I saw some of it online," I admitted. "Well, what you didn't see was the aftermath. Nora and Brett had a screaming match in the parking lot that could be heard 3 blocks away. Apparently he blamed her for not controlling her friends, and she blamed him for his reputation catching up with him. Did they work it out? Oh, heavens no. Brett drove off in that ridiculous truck of his, and Nora had to get a ride home with her parents. The marriage lasted exactly 4 hours. 4 hours. I'd been married to Nora for 15 years, and her new relationship had imploded in less time than it takes to drive to Boston. But I wasn't done yet. Over the next few weeks, I implemented the final phase of my revenge plan. It was subtle, methodical, and absolutely devastating. First, I used my connections in the logistics industry to make sure that Brett's attempts to find work at other gyms were unsuccessful. A few strategic phone calls to colleagues who worked with fitness equipment suppliers, and suddenly every gym in the region was hearing whispers about Brett's professional issues and client complaints. It wasn't illegal, wasn't even unethical by most standards. It was just information sharing among industry professionals, the kind of networking that happened every day in every business. Second, I made sure that Nora's financial situation became untenable. The divorce settlement had left her responsible for the affair-related debts, and with Brett's income gone, she had no way to pay them. Her credit score plummeted, making it impossible to get a decent apartment or car loan. Again, this wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. It was just the natural consequence of her choices catching up with her. The coup de grace came when I arranged for Nora's employer to discover some interesting information about her recent behavior. It turned out that she'd been using the dental office's computer to coordinate her affair, sending personal emails and making personal phone calls during work hours. She'd also been calling in sick frequently during the months leading up to the wedding, using the office's generous sick leave policy to spend time with Brett. I didn't report this information directly, of course. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I simply made sure it came to light through other channels. A former coworker who noticed irregularities in the computer logs, a patient who mentioned seeing Nora at the gym when she was supposed to be home sick. The dental office fired her for misuse of company resources and time theft. In a small town like Millfield, that kind of reputation followed you everywhere. Within 2 months of the wedding disaster, both Nora and Brett were unemployed, unmarried, and unemployable in their chosen fields. Meanwhile, I was thriving in Lisbon. My work with the international logistics company was going so well that I'd been promoted to regional manager for Southern Europe. I'd started dating a lovely Portuguese woman named Sofia who taught English at the University of Lisbon. I'd learned enough Portuguese to order dinner without embarrassing myself, and I'd developed a genuine appreciation for fado music. Most importantly, I'd discovered that I was actually happier alone than I'd ever been in my marriage. The constant walking on eggshells, the need to manage Nora's moods and expectations, the feeling that nothing I did was ever quite good enough, all of that was gone. In its place was a sense of peace and possibility that I'd forgotten was possible. I posted updates on social media occasionally, not to rub salt in any wounds, but simply to document my new life. Photos of weekend trips to Porto, dinners with Sofia and her friends, hiking in the Portuguese countryside. The contrast with Nora's situation was stark, and I knew she was seeing every post. 6 months after the wedding, Mrs. Delaney called with the final update I needed to hear. Nora's moved back in with her parents, she reported. Lost her apartment last month when she couldn't make rent. And that Brett fellow, word is he's working at a car wash out by the highway. That's unfortunate, I said, though we both knew I didn't mean it. She's been asking about you, wanting to know if anyone has your contact information in Portugal. What do you tell them? I tell them that you're doing very well for yourself, and that's all I know. Mrs. Delaney paused. Though between you and me, dear, I think you're better off without her. That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset over Lisbon's red-tiled roofs, holding a glass of wine and reflecting on the past year. A year ago, I'd been a middle-aged logistics coordinator in a failing marriage, going through the motions of a life that felt increasingly hollow. I'd been comfortable but not happy, secure but not satisfied. Now I was living in one of Europe's most beautiful cities, succeeding in an international career, and genuinely excited about the future for the first time in years. Nora had thought she was trading up when she chose Brett over me. She'd seen a boring, middle-aged husband and decided she deserved better, someone younger, more exciting, more physically impressive. What she'd failed to realize was that boring middle-aged husbands often became boring middle-aged husbands because they were busy building the kind of stable, successful lives that could weather any storm. Brett was exciting, but excitement without substance was just chaos waiting to happen. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. I almost deleted it without reading, but something made me look. Ethan, please. I know I hurt you, but I'm begging you to talk to me. I made a terrible mistake. I lost everything, and I don't know what to do. Please, just give me a chance to explain. It was Nora, reaching out from what was probably a borrowed phone since I'd blocked her number months ago. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no pity. Just the mild curiosity you might feel when observing an interesting but ultimately irrelevant scientific phenomenon. Then I deleted the message and blocked the number. Some stories ended with forgiveness and reconciliation. Others ended with justice and consequences. This was definitely the second kind of story. I raised my glass to the Lisbon skyline, toasting the sunset and the life I'd built from the ashes of my marriage. Saúde, I said aloud, using the Portuguese word for cheers that I'd grown to love. Behind me, my phone buzzed with another message, probably Nora trying from yet another number. I didn't even look. Some people spent their lives looking backward, trying to fix what was broken or reclaim what was lost. Others looked forward, toward new horizons and better possibilities. I knew which category I belonged to, and I'd never been happier about a choice in my entire life. The sun disappeared behind the hills west of the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have taken my breath away a year ago. Now they were just part of my daily routine, another beautiful moment in a life full of them. Revenge, I'd discovered, wasn't about making other people suffer. It was about making sure you never had to suffer the same way again.